Flippa.com is the 800-pound gorilla in the website buying and selling marketplace, and they're growing quickly as a domain name buying and selling marketplace. Should you be listing your domain names for sale there? We'll find out from the CEO of Flippa.com himself. Stay tuned. 3 messages before today's show. First, if you're a domain name investor, don't you have unique legal needs that require domain name technical know-how and industry experience? That's why you need David Westlow of Wiley Ryan. Go search for David Westlow on Domain Sherpa, watch his interviews, and you can see for yourself that he is intelligent and articulate, can help you with buy-sell agreements, deal with website content issues and UDRP actions, and can even help you write your website terms and conditions. David Westlow is the lawyer to call for all your internet and intellectual property needs. See for yourself at newmediaip.com. Second, when you have questions about domain names, where should you go to ask them? The answer is dnforum.com. Not only is DN Forum the largest domain name forum in the world, but it's the best. You can learn about domain names in the industry, buy and sell domain names, talk about domain name news, and meet other domainers just like yourself. Register for a free DN Forum account and begin advancing your skills and knowledge today. And when you do sign up, send me a friend request so we can connect. My ID is Domain Sherpa. Finally, whenever I'm thinking of buying or selling a domain name, the very first place I go is estibot.com. Their service provides quick and comprehensive information about the valuation and the critical factors that you need to know about, like other extensions that are reserved, recent sales, search volume, and cost per click rates on search engines. And if you haven't tried their lead generator service for domains you want to sell, you're missing one of the most powerful tools around. Those are the reasons I pay for the service every month. Here's your program. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Seiger and I'm the publisher of DomainSherpa.com, the website where you come to learn how to become a successful domain name investor or online entrepreneur directly from the experts. Flippa.com is the #1 marketplace for buying and selling websites. The company posted revenue of $1.38 million in the 2009-10 time period according to Smart Company. Today, we're going to learn about the latest trends in the website marketplace and how domain names will fit into their strategy going forward. And we're joined by the CEO of Flippa.com, Dave Slutzkin. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be with you.
I should point out to the audience right off the bat, I apologize. My camera seems to be having some difficulty today. So if you see me popping in and going out or locking up, I'm going to try and reset it and try and make it all transparent to the audience. Dave, you look great, by the way, and your camera has no problems.
That's good to hear. Thanks.
So, Dave, thanks for joining us. It's early in Australia. I quoted just now in the intro, Smart Company. They had some figure, I'm not sure where they got it from, 1.38 million in 2009-10. Is that a correct number?
That was pretty close for that time period, certainly. I mean, they did their best to estimate that.
Yeah, and I assume that's your profit, not your total revenue of all transactions flowing through the Flippa.com system.
No, that would be what we would claim financially, as opposed to the sell-through revenue, which is significantly higher than that, obviously.
Right. So over the last 12 months, what has been your profit?
We're not disclosing that at this point as a private company. We don't necessarily disclose all those numbers, but if you take that number as an anchor point for what was almost 2.5 or 3 years ago now, we've grown substantially since then. I think that's safe to say.
Excellent. So I read on your site that over 290,000 bids were placed and nearly 26,000 websites were sold on Flippa in 2011, valued at over or almost 31 million. That's an enormous amount.
Yeah, there's a huge amount already selling on Flippa, but what we know is that that's a tiny fraction of what could be sold. There's so much more out there. It turns out there's a lot of websites on the internet. I don't know if you've noticed, and that most of those could be sold on Flippa. So that's our ultimate goal.
Yeah, and so for anybody that hasn't ever heard of Flippa, I can't imagine anybody in my audience not having heard of Flippa, but for anybody that hasn't, how do you describe Flippa to brand new customers potentially?
Flippa is the web's biggest marketplace for buying and selling websites. It's really that simple. For us, we concentrate very heavily on the buying and selling websites. We know that we can provide the best marketplace for that, and we know that that's what we do, and we're going to continue to do that in the future.
Okay. So right now I see on your website 1,700 listings are open. That means that individual websites and or domain names are currently being offered for sale on Flippa?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they're all in an active sales process, which differentiates us slightly from some other kind of what I'd call almost back catalog marketplaces where people list their inventory and then it sits there for a while until someone's interested in it. We have a very active auction system, and everything that's listed on Flippa is being paid attention to directly by the seller.
Yeah.
And hopefully by a large number of buyers as well.
Well, and that's the key for anybody that has a website that they want to sell. Clearly, they can go out, they can put a for sale banner on the top, they can go out and hire a broker, they can go to eBay and list it. But at the end of the day, they're going to get the highest money, the highest purchase price by getting the most amount of people to view it, right? Because some percentage of them is going to be interested in it. So from that standpoint, Flippa is the best alternative in terms of having more people on the website in the marketplace viewing the listings?
Absolutely. We have the biggest collection of website buyers, which we're very grateful for, and we're always trying our best to cater for those website buyers. We know what they want. We know to some extent what they want, and we're always trying to find out better and better how we can tailor our product for those website buyers. But it's not just about having the large number of buyers. It's also about having a system which allows you to get the highest price. The auction system is actually really good for driving interest in a sale, and that's why we find that it works very well.
Mm-hmm. And so every auction, every listing is an auction on Flippa? Is it required? Can I just list my domain name for sale on Flippa?
You can just list it for sale. We have what we call a private sale option, which is relatively little used, and there's a reason for that. It doesn't work as well, to be completely honest with you. It's if someone feels like that's a useful option for them, then we're absolutely happy to provide that service. And we know that people have got good results from our private sale. But we also know that the auction system, a short auction, a 7-day, a 14-day, a 28-day auction, really drives interest. As I mentioned before, it gets the buzz going around the sale, if you like.
So if I have a website or a domain name for sale, I can go online and onto Flippa and I can list it for $10,000, let's say, or I can start an auction. Can I start an auction with a buy it now price that if somebody just wants to end the auction, they can purchase it for a specific price?
Absolutely, yeah. It's very similar to the eBay system in that way. You can start your opening bid. It's slightly different to eBay in that you start your opening bid at a particular price. You can have a reserve price which is higher than that. So if you know that you don't want to sell your website for any less than $10,000, you can still open the bidding at $1,000 and see how much interest you can build up. But you have the peace of mind of knowing that you're not going to sell for less than the $10,000, which you've set as your reserve price.
Right. Excellent. And I saw another statistic on your website that 50% of the websites sold, or 50% of the websites sold in the last 3 months. So basically, of all the inventory that you have on your website, 50% sell.
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah. Is that a good number? I'm, not having known about sales is, if I go to eBay and I look up what happens on their website, is yours better than theirs, or?
I don't necessarily compare us directly with eBay in that way, but we think that 50% is a reasonable number. It's pretty good. You list your website, you've got a 1 in 2 chance of having that sell for a price that you're happy with. But we're always striving to improve it. We'd love to have 100% of our websites sell because our sellers price them perfectly and our buyers know exactly what they're looking for. Yeah. That's what we're striving towards. So we're getting there. I mean, 50%, as I said, I think that's a pretty good number.
Yeah. Flippa.com launched in 2009, so it's still relatively new. To put it in perspective, eBay launched 14 years before you, but you're the #1 marketplace. How did the idea for Flippa first come about?
Flippa came about as almost organically. Previously, there was a company called SitePoint, and they were a web development forum, and still are, for that matter. They're still a sister company of ours. They had a thing called the SitePoint Marketplace, which evolved from buying and selling of websites in the SitePoint web development forums. SitePoint Marketplace was really successful. That became the #1 destination for buying and selling websites. And then in 2009, we decided that Flippa deserved, well, the marketplace deserved a new home. It deserved a bit more oxygen. It deserved the space to really build and grow the way that we knew it could. So we made the call in 2009 to spin it out and turn it into a standalone website and a standalone market and a standalone brand. And that's worked really well for us, to be honest.
Great. And during that time, you went from SitePoint.com, which was a discussion forum, to SitePoint Marketplace as an addition to SitePoint. And then you launched Flippa. At some point, 99 Designs came out of it as well. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, they're another sister company of ours. So we're all still in the same group. We're all, for a little longer at least, in the same building here in Melbourne. 99 Designs was a couple of years before Flippa span out. 99 Designs span out in a very similar way. So we tend to use them as maybe as an older sibling, if you like. We take lessons from them. You know, they've blazed a trail. We certainly like to talk to them as much as possible for advice, because those guys are barnstorming. Everyone knows who they are. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, and you know, I can say that the Domain Sherpa has received some of the benefit from 99 Designs. I use 99 Designs to find an artist for the logo of Domain Sherpa when I was coming up with the idea, and I wanted some sort of image to portray to help people figure out how to climb that mountain. It oftentimes seems like when you're trying to figure out the domain name industry. So, you know, found a great artist that I've continued to use through 99 Designs.
That's a success story. I'll put the guys on to you. They can use you as a testimonial.
Excellent. All right. So you went, did 99 Designs come before or after Flippa.com?
Before. It was a couple of years earlier.
A couple of years. So you've got 99 Designs, which makes sense. I'm going to go on there. I'm going to submit my contest. Hopefully I'm going to get 99 designs submitted for my contest, which I may have gotten on Domain Sherpa. I've, again, used it for a website development. I didn't quite get to 99, but that's the idea behind it, at least. On Flippa, how did you come up with the name for Flippa and decide on that domain name?
We have an internal branding guru, I suppose, and that's my chairman, Mark Harbottle. He's the guy for the names. He named SitePoint, and that was 13 years ago now that he named SitePoint. He named 99 Designs, he's named Flippa, he's named Learnable and Tweaky, other spin-outs and related companies of ours. He's the man. He's the, in many ways, a mentor of mine. He's a great guy to work for, and he's just got the mind for it. He comes up with a name and it sticks. Certainly Flippa's been one of those names that people hear once and they remember.
Yeah, definitely. So what challenges did you face when you launched Flippa.com that you didn't experience on SitePoint Marketplace?
Flippa was interesting because when we span it out, it gained a lot of oxygen in both good ways and bad ways. The SitePoint Marketplace was a relatively small and insular community of people. Everyone knew each other to some extent. You know, a few new users came in, a few old users left, but generally it was a pretty static community in some ways. But then we span out to Flippa, and all of a sudden we had this influx of new users, an influx of people who didn't necessarily know how the marketplace worked, who didn't necessarily know what the norms of the marketplace were. And that's just an interesting challenge. It's good and bad. It's good because it brings new ideas and new expectations to the market. It's bad because it can bring some confusion and complication to the market. So it was really interesting for us to suddenly have this influx, which has kind of continued to the present day of users who are much newer to buying and selling websites.
Yeah, and how do you deal with that, Dave, knowing that you're always going to have an influx of, you know, new users coming in? How do you get them up to speed as quickly as possible so they're following the norms that everybody expects that's been on the site for a while?
Yeah, that's a good question. We try our hardest, and this is something we're always working on, we try our hardest to work with them as much as possible in giving them as much educational material as we can. We produce some really great ebooks and we revise them pretty frequently in order to make sure that people have the material at their fingertips if they choose to use it. And to some extent, we work closely with some external providers, effectively education providers, who we know do good stuff, who we've spoken to, we've looked at their material, we know that they're portraying things accurately as much as possible, because in this game. There can be some people who maybe overhype things a little. We work with the people who we know are trustworthy, and we then can have really useful partnerships with them, which help our users a great deal.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, speaking as a customer of, say, 99 Designs, which I'm sure translates over into Flippa, you know, I remember getting emails every step of the process. As the process evolved, I would get an email saying, great, this has been done. Here's what you need to do next. And that was very helpful. I haven't gone through a purchase or sale on Flippa.com. Is it a similar type of environment?
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, we're always looking to improve that. It's a real product focus that we have here, and that we're actually ramping up to some extent our product focus to make sure that we really know what people are doing at each step of the process, and that it's really obvious to them. They have a good user experience on Flippa. That's really important to us.
Yeah. So our producer, Wayne Nelson, who conducted the pre-interview with you, tells me that domain names have been selling very well on Flippa lately.
Yeah, and that's something that we're not, I wouldn't say surprised about, but it's something that we didn't necessarily expect in the last 6 months or so. There's definitely been an influx of domains into Flippa itself. And there's open questions as to why that is, to be completely.
You haven't been able to nail it down yet.
Not necessarily. What we do really well is websites. That's what we focus on. We don't necessarily focus on domains. We know there are other marketplaces out there who do domains really well. But when in talking to some of these people who've listed domains on Flippa in the last 3 to 6 months, what they really like about Flippa is that the sales process allows them to sell more. They can sell their domain more. It's not as simple as just listing it and saying, well, this is a name, buy it or not, as you choose. You can put some text about the domain. You can put a whole pitch in about why someone would want to buy the domain, where it's been, what's good about it, the history of the domain, all of these things. And people really like that, especially for quality domains. That seems to be something that really appeals to a lot of owners. And it allows them to be more active in the sale process as well, to really work more closely with their buyers to come hopefully to an agreement. So it's, in some ways, it's not surprising that people are using the site more and more to sell domains, especially as parking revenue dries up and as the distinction between websites and domains becomes less stark. But at the same time, it's not something we've particularly focused on.
Yeah, it is interesting because I do find that when I look through Flippa, and I do somewhat often because I like to see what websites are selling and how people are marketing it, that creating that story, the narrative to help bring people along into why this might be a good investment is useful. And I think that domain names often are reduced down to, you know, a set of characters, and that's it. You know, you list it in a newsletter and it's just the domain name, and they barely have any marketing or promotional material. So I think that it is, you know, a great distinction that your site has. And I'm not sure if you've thought about this, but since you do have a lot of entrepreneurs and developers on the website looking for some additional revenue, they probably, you know, they're looking for undervalued assets that they can develop, add some social media to, write some content and publish to. And, you know, domain names could be a great asset as well, and undervalued because they just don't, you know, you can buy a website that maybe has $500 a month in revenue or $1,000, but it's on a terrible domain name. So, you know, or a questionable one. You can instead buy a great one, and if you already have the skills, then you can just start developing it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's essentially what we see on Flippa really frequently. Is that it is that almost that skill exchange that you're talking about there. That someone will buy a website that is that looks really ugly. It's very poorly designed, and they know that they have skills in design, so they'll be able to improve that thing about the website. Or they'll buy a website that has poor content but has really good design and a good domain name, and they'll improve the content. Or they'll buy a website that has, as you say, a poor domain name because they know that they have the skills in finding a good domain name for that website. It almost becomes a skill exchange that people take the website as far as they can themselves and then pass it on to someone who can take it up to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. And so when I visited Flippa.com recently, I see in the upper right-hand corner, and I think maybe bright red text, sell your website today. I don't see anything about sell your domain name today. And in fact, I have to navigate through the menu to figure out where to even look for domain names. It's, I think, under one of the pull downs that under, you know, the categories, you have domains listed there. Is that the best way to navigate to the domain names that are currently listed for sale?
As it stands, it is, because I suppose, as I said, it's not something we focus on. necessarily. It's not
Yeah.
something where that we're necessarily even going to focus on in the future. If people want to sell them domain names on Flippa, then absolutely we'll help them out with that, because we know we have a good offering. But there's a certain art in business, I suppose, of focusing on one particular thing, of really narrowing down so that you know that you can do one thing well, and then maybe worry about everything else. We're the best at websites, and we're still not as good as we want to be. So the more focus we can put on websites, the better. So it means that we don't necessarily want to spend time building a domain offering for people.
Got it. I came across silver.com, a great premium domain name that's up for auction on flippa.com. It's scheduled to end, I believe, on January 2nd or 3rd, and as of this taping, Dave, it's up to $40,000. Is that a domain name that you went after and tried to get listed on Flippa, or do you know if the seller just decided to list it there instead of any other marketplace?
I haven't looked specifically at that one, but we certainly wouldn't have gone after it specifically. We don't do any inbound acquisition on straight domain names at this point. That's not something that we necessarily focus on. But what we know is that we have at least a handful of people who have really strong portfolios who are getting really good results listing them on Flippa. So it's quite possible, without me having looked at that specifically, that that's one of those people that you're talking about.
Great. So let's say a domain name owner wants to list their domain name on Flippa, and they go on there, they put the domain name, they describe it, they write the full summary of what people can do with it, how they haven't had time to develop it, what have you. What's the best way to drive more people to view the domain name, since it isn't necessarily an area that you're focusing on? Are there any specific tactics that they can use?
Yeah, with any listing on Flippa, with any listing on any site, I suppose, you're really looking to get to the right person. We do a fair bit to help you get to the right person, and we'll help you categorize your domain in such a way that hopefully people who are looking for, say in the case of silver, people who are looking for precious metal related domains will find it. But it's also really important, if you can identify anyone out there across the internet, anyone who would be interested in this domain, just a quick email to them to say, hey, you might be interested in this. I've got it listed at the moment. If you want, have a glance and maybe you can bid on it. That's always important. And that's something that the marketplace can't necessarily do for you. We're always trying to get as many quality buyers in as possible, but the marketplace can't necessarily identify exactly who'd be great to buy, for instance, silver.com. So the more that the seller can do on that front to find potential buyers and pull them in, then our auction system can kind of help the seller to get the best price from those buyers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything that they can do through your auction platform to help drive more viewership, bolding a headline, things like that? Do you find those to be...
That's right. We always have those upgrades that similar to eBay or most other marketplaces, we always have those upgrades that you can purchase, and especially if you're selling a domain for tens of thousands of dollars, the upgrades are relatively cheap on that front. You can bump it to the top of the front page of the website, and you can do that as many times as you want. That's something that we'll get really good results from. It just keeps you in front of people's eyes so that they know that you're still there. So that's something that, if you're selling a domain for a significant price, it's a great option. Yeah,
and I did see one option listed. It's called Premium Domain Listing for $500. Is that bumping to the homepage that you just described?
Yeah, that one actually, that's a really good option because it keeps you pretty close to the top of the list for the entire time that the domain is listed. It also gives you access to premium support, which is really important. We have some pretty capable support people here who can help you out with quite a lot of things, and that premium option gives you access to those guys. That's something that a lot of people find very useful, especially if you're selling for the first or second time and maybe you're not quite sure how the process is supposed to work.
Okay, so if I purchase that, they'll help me write a better description or deal with unruly questions or what, any and all of that?
All of those things, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's see here. And so once the transaction starts the auction, I can set a 7-day, a 14-day, I think you said a 30-day. Isn't it best if I always go 30 days because then there's more people that will notice it and follow it?
To some extent, that's true, depending on the value of the site, of the site or domain, because people often need a little bit of time to do due diligence on it, to think about what they might do with it, etc., etc. But that said, most of the action in any auction, if you've been to a house auction or a property auction of some sort, most of the action comes at the start and at the end. In fact, most of it comes at the end, really. At the start, people notice the auction, and then it often goes quiet in the middle. There's a communication period there where you're talking back and forth with some buyers, but really what happens is at the end. So generally, the shorter time period, not necessarily the better of the results, but you can get just as good a result from a 7-day auction often as you can from a 28-day auction, especially if you've got a really quality piece of property.
Yeah. I hear a lot of domain sellers complaining about some other marketplaces, saying that they went through the process, the buyer bid on it, and then they just dropped off the face of the planet. They won't respond to emails. Maybe they're from another country. It's frustrating. Not only did you waste your time going through the auction, but then it sort of mars the domain or the property that, you put it back up for auction. People are wondering, like, what just happened? I saw this before. Is there a problem with the seller? Did they welch on the deal? Or how do you deal with making sure that you get sellers and buyers with integrity, that they're not trying to just game the system?
This is something that the seller can really focus on themselves. You got to remember that this is a business deal, and like any business deal, the success or failure of the deal is going to hinge on the quality of the communication. Mm-hmm. So accepting a bid from someone that you've never spoken to for $100,000, generally, in the same way that you wouldn't do that for your car, maybe, you probably shouldn't be doing that for your domain name or website. If you get a bid from someone for $100,000, you can have a conversation with them, get them on Skype, get them on the phone. After a 5-minute conversation, you know 100 times as much about that person as you did before that 5-minute conversation. And then you know whether or not they're the sort of person you want to do business with. So really, we do as much as we can to facilitate this. It all comes down to communication. The most successful deals on our site are the ones where the seller and the buyer were communicating the best.
So if somebody bids $100,000 on my website on Flippa.com, I know their Skype address and I can start up a conversation and learn a little bit more about them?
You can communicate with them on Flippa to start with, and then you can go back and forward. We have no problem with you then communicating with them via Skype or via whatever other method makes sense. We can't disclose that immediately because that's, there's certain personal information requirements obviously there.
Right.
But we ask you as much as possible to communicate, to try and incentivize you to communicate with that person as much as possible.
Yeah. And if I'm the buyer in one of the auctions happening on Flippa.com, am I guaranteed that if I'm the high bidder at the close of the auction that the seller will be required to sell it to me?
Absolutely, yeah. That's the basic fundamental of an auction system, isn't it? The buyer has to have confidence that they are going to be the buyer if they're winning bidder.
Right. And is it possible for the seller to stop an auction in mid-process at all?
The seller can call the auction at any time, yeah. They can, if they have a bid that's high enough for them, they can say, oh, that's it. I'm happy to stop the auction here.
Yeah.
This is another factor in favour of communication from the buyer's point of view. Mm-hmm. If you're talking back and forth with the seller and they maybe know that you have a little bit more gas in the tank, then they're much less likely to stop the auction early. Whereas if you haven't spoken to them at all, they might be like, oh, well, that's his final bid, so this other guy bid higher, I'm happy to stop there. So once again, communication is key.
Yeah. 10 years ago, did you ever think that you were going to be like the auctioneer, the master of the auction universe, where you're going to help so many people sell their websites and buy websites online?
Not even slightly, to be honest. 10 years ago, I was building software for airlines, which was a completely different kettle of fish to domain names on the internet, let me tell you.
Yeah. Looking back, what do you think that you've learned that you never thought you would have learned through the website auction process?
To be honest, and I've just been harping on it, so it'll sound kind of boring, but the communication thing, the fact that the burden that business deals place on communication and how that is the absolute key to trust is the thing that I've found most, that I've learnt most, I suppose, in this. Because when you first look at a business deal, you think, oh, it's all about the money. That's all it's about. But there's so many more factors to that. There's the trust and the integrity and the safety factors that come into it, and they can only be gained by solid communication between the parties.
Yeah, and it's amazing how a communication vehicle like the internet, which allows you to, text and email and chat and do all these things, like oftentimes it is to the detriment of a deal, that people feel don't take the time to communicate clearly in their written word. And yeah, we should have a whole interview about how to communicate clearly on the internet. How do you help website and domain name owners that want to list their assets for sale on your marketplace value them and set an appropriate sales price?
That's a really tricky one. So we provide them with, there's a valuation tool that we have, which is actually pretty accurate, we find, but it gives a fairly broad range. So what we often say to people is that the best way of working out what your domain name is worth or your website is worth, you can list it on Flippa, but you don't necessarily have to sell. You can put a fairly high reserve price on it and have the bids, have the opening bid be a fair bit lower than that. And that gives you the option of running a short 7-day auction and getting a really good idea of what the ballpark for your website or domain is. After that 7 days, you know that you got 35 bids up to $7,500. Therefore, this domain name is probably worth around that mark. Yeah. Sure, you might want to push for $10,000 or $12,000, which is completely fine, but you know that it's somewhere around that mark probably. That's the auction process is really good for giving you that, because if a buyer wants it, they're going to bid.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. So your listing fee, I believe, is $29. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Website, domain name, regardless of size, $29.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I have a domain name that I think is worth $10,000 that I'd be willing to take $5,000 for, I can list it with a $5,000 reserve, 7-day auction, it cost me $29, and if it never hits that $5,000 reserve, I can find out what the marketplace, the Flippa marketplace, thinks it's worth, what the highest bid was.
That's absolutely right, yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, so we talked about getting the best results for the domain name or the website for sale, some different options for highlighting it. We talked about fraud a little bit. What kind of monitoring and safeguards does Flippa use to make sure that a seller of a website that says that they, you know, have $1,000 a month and $100,000 visitors per month actually has those metrics?
We do a huge amount of work on fraud. Obviously, we need to be the trusted marketplace. We need to be the safest place that you can possibly do business on the internet. So we are always working hard on that. From the traffic point of view, we integrate tightly with Google Analytics, and that gives us a really good idea of what someone's traffic actually is. Mm-hmm. And we also integrate strongly with Google AdSense for a similar reason. And we're always working on integrating more revenue sources that we can verify. So we're talking to affiliate revenue providers, for instance, someone like a ClickBank or a Commission Junction. We're obviously talking to those guys and a number of other places about being able to verify that revenue and being able to verify the traffic. So there are a number of other, I mean, Google Analytics is by far the biggest, but there are a number of other analytics providers who we're also looking at. So that's the key for us, is being able to verify those things. It's the less uncertainty there is in a deal, the better the price will be for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. So anybody that's not familiar, if you go and list a website and you have Google Analytics on the website and Google AdSense on the website, and you say your traffic is 1,000 visitors and $1,000 per month, you can provide access to those accounts through Flippa. Flippa will sign into those accounts, verify the domain name, the website actually has those results that you're claiming, and then you, as a third-party independent marketplace, will verify it for the seller.
Yeah, we'll grab the figures down and we'll say, this is what we read directly from the Google Analytics account. We won't publicize access to the account itself, obviously.
Right.
We'll grab down the figures and say, this is what we verified as what the seller actually claimed.
Yeah. What's the best way, since communication is so key and that leads to trust between the buyers and the seller, is there anything else that can be done for a seller to maximize that credibility, that trust on your marketplace?
Being open and honest with anyone who's looking at your site is by far the easiest way. I mean, that's the thing that you just have to do. And being really active in your management of the auction as well. If someone sends you a question and doesn't get a response for 2 days, that's not really going to make you look so good. If someone sends you a question, on the other hand, they get a response an hour later, it gives them the answer to all their questions. It's a really nice response, a full response. It leaves the way open for further discussions. That's something which works really well. And once again, that's what we see, that the auctions that work out the best for us are the ones where the most communication occurred and the communication was clearest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dave, final question for you. What's coming in the future? What projects do you have that people can expect to see in the near future through Flippa?
There's a lot of interesting things. I suppose the thing look, my marketing department will probably kill me, but I'll give you guys a sneak peek. There's a few things on the drawing board, but the thing that we're probably closest to really rolling out and launching fully is a website portfolio management tool that we think is really useful for people. So what we know about Flippa users is that many of them have these website portfolios. They don't just have a single site, or they don't just have a single site to sell. They have a lot of sites. And managing those is, to some extent, an art more than a science, because you might have revenue coming from various places. You've got traffic information in various places. What we're pushing for is a really solid website portfolio management tool. We're 95% implemented on that. It helps you look across your Google Analytics, across the entire portfolio, look across revenue across the entire portfolio, get summaries of where it's been, where it's going, get alerts when things are going worse suddenly or going better suddenly, things that you need to know about your portfolio as a whole. And that's, from our early feedback from a few trial users, seems to be something that people are going to find really useful. So that's what we're really excited about in the short term, helping people to get a much better look at their website investments overall.
Yeah, that's great. This is the point in the conversation, Dave, where I ask the audience if they have follow-up questions for you to please post it in the comments below the video, and then I will ask you to come back and answer as many as you have time for. If people want to follow you, Dave, on Twitter, what's the best username or handle for them to follow?
My Twitter is twitter.com/Dave Slutzkin. That's not very easy to spell, unfortunately, but I'm sure you can. Mike will have a link for you. Hopefully.
I will put that
My
in
Twitter
here.
account is full of inanity, though, so I wouldn't expect too much profundity from them.
All right, and then if people want to follow Flippa on Twitter, it's @Flippa, and then, of course, you're on Facebook, @Flippa Marketplace, all one word.
That's great.
So, Dave Slutzkin, CEO of Flippa.com, thanks for coming on the show, helping us understand how domain name investors can take advantage of the Flippa.com marketplace. Thank you for putting up with my video camera that seems to be going in and out literally every 30 seconds. And thank you for being a domain Sherpa for others.
Thanks very much, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.